so she can hear it in Australia. Won't that just like drown everybody out? Sorry.
Okay, hey Tiffany, can you just give me a text back that if it's okay? I think I just fixed it.
Okay then. Okay, I'll hang up and I'll text you back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye again. I didn't charge her for the time. So so this image again, this is the kind of the end of the nerve cell, how it's actually receiving these receptions from these various chemicals. Like I said, it's like this key lock phenomenon. Let me see if I can make this picture bigger for you. Right? So we literally have on the end of our nerve endings, we literally have these receptors specifically made for opioids. It's just perfect key lock type scenario, and that does go along with this theory. You can imagine that if humans have been indulging in these plants, like kind of Michael was suggesting, that you could create almost a symbiosis between humans and these plants, right? So the plant is evolving along with human beings. The plants that give the more drugs, humans will cultivate more, therefore they, selectively do better in evolution. And the question is, do we do better in evolution with drugs or not? And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I think we should go there. So let's have a look at some of this other really reason why I raise this as a crisis. Okay, so this slide here reads, how bad is it? How bad is this actually? And this is an interactive, which is why I had to show it live like this. I couldn't just put it in a PowerPoint slide. There's a couple of these that are interactives, but here I can make this a little bigger so you can see. This is a projection. There's a projection here into the future to some extent. Oh no, this is the live data. The next one is a projection. But here how you see where US stands compared to some of these other nations just from a visual graph. And these still look like relatively low percentages, right? You see 0.5%, 1.0%, etc. But when you think about that, that's contrasted against 330 million people.
Right.
That's a lot of dead bodies washing up on shore from drug overdose.
Yeah.
To my mind, pretty much an unacceptable amount. I mean,
can we see the scale at the bottom?
Yeah, could you know? Sure. This is years at the bottom. This is over time.
It's just 14 years.
Yep.
Those are
Includes both deaths from poisoning and those caused by drug-related mental disorders. Right? From the World Health Organization.
so currently there's about 2%.
Yeah, and you see the trend line here. This is kind of frightening. So the next graph that I found was like really instrumental because that does the projections out into the future. I'll show you this one. And again, I'll make this one larger as well. But this has an interactive where you can activate these other forecast lines. It's kind of cool. This monitor that I put it over is much higher resolution, so I expand all this. Here you go. So these are different scenarios, right? Opiate death forecast for 2027. It's 93,613.
And that's in the total US?
Yeah, that's the forecast for 2027 if the current trends continue. We're looking at a pretty large number of people, even larger than today by quite a bit, dying from opioids or drug-related opioid use. Now, if you go around and you kind of look under the dark web a little bit for some information about this, the availability of it is, I did a little bit of dark web searching for this too.
How do you get to the
curiosity.
dark web?
How do you get to the dark web? Just Google it. You'll find out how to get to it.
Okay.
It's an open door. Yeah. And you can buy the derivatives of opioids very, very easily online, especially if you're willing to spend some money.
Can I ask a question? Like opioids, what does that cover? Does that cover heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, Xanax?
All the ones you have. No, not Xanax. Xanax is
No, not Xanax. Valium.
No,
Valium. What is
I think
Xanax?
Valium is in it.
No.
It's not.
No.
Oh, let's look.
Bill is a retired psychiatrist.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I didn't treat any drug
Opioid.
dependency or things. So.
But you do have some level of expertise in the field.
Well, that's drifting into the past.
It's so hard, it's true, you forget when you're away from it for a certain amount of time. It's amazing how quick you forget stuff.
So here's a list for you of some various names.
Okay.
Brand names and then quote unquote street names. So codeine, that's
Captain Cody. Schoolboy.
Demerol.
Makes you
probably.
feel old. I'll be like, I've
Yeah.
never heard of that. Demerol I've heard of. And Percocet.
Pancakes and syrup. That's an
Oh,
interesting name for it. Percocet, that's the big one I was thinking of.
Yeah. Hillbilly heroin.
Yeah.
I've heard that actually.
Yeah.
Tylenol with codeine.
That's hydrocodone, isn't it?
Yep.
What is
So Oxycontin, that's a
Oxycodone.
big one. The
Oxycodone.
Oxycontin is a huge one that's given out by the pharmaceutical
Right.
industry quite readily.
And now, is that the same Oxycontin or cotton, whatever? Is that similar to codeine, or it's different?
No,
or
it's not the same.
it's-
But they're all derivatives of the same type of,
Yeah.
what is it, the protein or the amino, I don't know how, the actual ketone I think it's called. It's
well,
the shape of the
proteins are
molecule.
made up
Yeah,
of
the
amino
fact is
acids.
that every single one of these starts with the shape of that fits the receptor
That fits the
in the
receptor.
opium.
Yeah.
And then when you find out that, excuse me, all of the various things that we have now that are big drug problems were originally invented to treat addiction.
As a substitute.
Like morphine.
Morphine was invented to treat heroin, opium addicts.
Yeah.
And then heroin was invented to treat opium addicts. And then we have, what's the Dolphine?
What's that? Never heard of that one.
That was back when I was much more closely related to the drug culture than I am now. And most of the addicts I knew said that, man, horse was tough to kick, but Dolphine was just a killer. You
Just
couldn't
horse
get off
heroin.
of it. Couldn't get off of it. Somebody who had gotten off of heroin and then relapsed, but then they couldn't get off Dolphine. It was the drug. They had clinics where you could go get your Dolphine, and once you were on it, they would limit you couldn't increase your dose from what you originally got there, because that would be very hard to sell the health department that you were treating this person for an addiction and increasing their dose week after week. So you went to 2 different doctors, and
Oh.
then
Is that the same as methadone?
that's what methadone is Dolphine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So this is what happens is each time we've come up with a pharmacological treatment for addiction to pharmacological substances, it hasn't worked, and yet we keep trying it. That in psychology, isn't that called being crazy? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the results to be different this time?
So this was actually the quote I was going to show. I forgot to do the quote piece, but you can read this for yourself. It's on a huge screen now. So
Yeah.
Yep.
The terrorist threat families in America see is not mystery.
So this fentanyl
Yeah.
deal is what this is it has that same chemical composition that fits the receptors, and it can be made synthetically with
And it's like 50 times stronger than
can
heroin.
be, yeah.
And carfentanil is even worse.
yeah.
And from what I understand, the consistency in the dosaging is so off that somebody that's used to taking a certain amount can get a really strong batch and take that, and next thing you know, find themselves in big trouble. So that's this quote from Senator Ed Markey is, it's kind of clever, but at the same time, it's maybe a different, I don't know, we can kind of pull this apart. We can pull this quote apart, I think, a little bit. It's a little snarky, but at the same time, if you look at it as a threat, like
Yeah.
what's really threatening our families and our households? Is it terrorism, or is it this wave of drugs sweeping our country? So it's interesting way to look at it. So I want to
Equating it to terrorism, I don't think works.
yeah, that's now you can get into some of the narco-terrorism, associated, like genuinely associated with the drug trade. That's a serious thing. So there is a lot of narco-terrorism that goes on, and I think that's legitimate. I think that's a legitimate terrorism. I'm talking like, you know, down in Mexico and stuff.
Yeah.
These big kingpins, cartels, they run the show with fear. You know,
They run the country.
They run the country. So
With fear.
to some extent, that is almost textbook terrorism. But I guess if you put it all underneath the domain of drug use and not having a political agenda, but I think it's too large to not have a political agenda. I think it does fit the definition of terrorism.
Yeah.
And that's serious. And so the United States by far is the largest consuming nation of drugs. We have a culture in the United States of take a pill for it. I think we were talking about that pre-meeting, Michael.
First in the world.
Yeah, we're the best. We're the best. America. And so that's just interesting to know. So we do have a psychology of taking a pill when anything hurts. You know, you get the sniffles, you take a pill. You take a pill for anything, you know, and
See your doctor.
yeah. This trend line, this isn't for the scope of this discussion, but I think it is worth raising really quickly. This trend has also gone down into our youth. The number of kids that are on mind-altering medications, Adderall, the ADD medication, and stuff like that is, I think, worse epidemic than the opioids. But you know, this isn't not here just to subjugate you to my opinions. But you know, that's for the number of children that truly would be brain chemistry, truly ADD, versus the amount that are prescribed, is quite a discrepancy. Yeah, we learned about that. I was an education major at UNC Charlotte, and we
really?
talked about that extensively. How much prevalence there is, and you get these advocate
So
teachers.
people are like prescribing it, and it's not necessarily really needed. Like they're not really suffering from
It's a
those.
subjective test.
Yeah.
Well, and
A lot of the tests are subjective.
there's no outcome follow-up on ADD drugs, and because once the kid goes on them, he stays on them. And so then you have to decide which percentage of those kids whose grades got better and whose adjustments to their anyone who does, that's the drug working well. It doesn't matter if anything else in their life changed. We don't have a control group for this particular statistical exercise. And I'm sorry, statistics without a control group is witchcraft. There's no scientific validity whatsoever.
Right. You have an outcome in mind, and you work your statistics to prove it.
I think we see quite a bit of that.
Do the kids ever get off of it though? Like as they grow into adults, or?
Yeah, when they can get their own on the street, they don't need a prescription anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, there's probably that's a joke, but there's probably something to that, right? So this is interesting. This is a bunch of different trend lines, and this is the interactive that I wanted to show you. It's like these are different projections, different models based on just different trends and stuff. And so that's where you get kind of the best and worst case scenario that you can pull from. And if you notice down here in the bottom, you see the actual like tallies changing, and it's cool because it's got a slider that you can scroll back in time on. I thought that was kind of cool too. So kind of how it's forecasted out right now, if you look at this kind of worst case scenario and you look at the number of deaths going forward, that's where they get their 93,613 from. So that's a 183% increase since 2015. Yeah. And you know, so one model project puts it that way. These are just different statistical models that are trying to shape where the trend line is going to be. And even if you go to the best case scenario, we're still looking at 21,300 deaths from opioids or combinations therein. So another thing you can do is you can go on YouTube and some other sources, and you can find advice for people are sharing, like people that do drugs and are into this kind of world. They're sharing information about the world with each other online.
Oh, okay.
And so how to get it, where the good stuff is, and sometimes they're saying there's high school up in Ohio right now making an app. Some kids are getting a lot of fame from it, which is basically if you get a bad batch of these drugs, you can report it on the app, and then everyone else that uses the app knows which dealer basically to stay away from.
But doesn't this potentially get them in trouble with the law?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It can also be used to fight your other drug dealers in the area. Claim they had bad product.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can get into so this like techno turf war associated with it. So you know, I guess you can look at it from one lens of which it's a really positive thing, and you look at it from another lens of wow, the disaster, what a nightmare. You know.
I got to tell you, when you talk about which group of people are probably the most adept at using modern communication technology and computers, high school kids or the FBI, I gotta tell you, I'm thinking it's probably the high school kids, you know?
Great point. So I'm tracking my time on my little presentation. I don't want to go over 10 or 15 minutes. It's like kind of throttle myself here. So you know, regardless of how you slice it, this is a problem, continuing problem into the future, long into the future. I don't think it's going to solve itself overnight. And if you look at some of the more dire scenarios, no pun intended, you're seeing how it extends. It's going to be an extended long-term problem here in our country. That's kind of the takeaway from what's happening.
Yeah, but is this the actual problem, or is it simply a symptom of the problem?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask y'all about, and so we can get into that that part of the talk, I guess, right now. So that's just a couple things for you to throw out there. I guess the statistics don't lie about how clearly this is indeed a real social problem. And so I'll first present my theory as to why this is happening, and it's more or less a continuation from last week's topic, which you remember what that was, jobs in America, right? And the end of
That was
jobs.
a whole week ago.
Yeah, right. Jobs in America, and how AI and robotics is more or less taking over most of the unskilled work. And if you look at the labor pool, a majority of people are in the unskilled category. And so that means the future is a majority of people that have what they suspect is long-term employment are going to be in for a rude awakening in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so kind of the trend of going into some factory somewhere and working, and then your kids come in and take over that job for you someday, start in the mailroom and work your way up to the top, is just, those days are long gone. And they don't look like they're coming back anytime soon. So my theory is the reason why people have turned to these opioids is that the type of pressure that's being put on our society through technology and through other mediums is putting not physical pressure on people, but it's putting emotional pressure on people. And so a majority of their pain, quote unquote, isn't coming from back or coming from knees and things like that. It's coming from feeling as if you don't have a place in this world. And so what better thing to turn to than, because these drugs also help with the mental pain as well. And so your back is going to hurt a little more if you're out of work, I can assure you. Your back will hurt a little more if you lost your job 6 months ago and you've been looking for work ever since. Your back is going to hurt a little bit more when you go to the doctor and talk about your pain. And so what I believe strongly is that there's a correlation. Last week, Pat, we talked about jobs in America,
Right.
and how really automation is the reason why so many Americans have lost their manufacturing jobs.
Yeah.
The perception of people is that it's Mexicans and bad trade deals in China and all this kind of stuff. But in fact, the statistics show quite clearly that it's automation that is taking people's low-skilled jobs, not other people. There's been some losses, like 13%, I think it showed, to other people, going overseas and stuff like that. But overwhelming majority, 86% was the statistic here in America that we showed last week. People have lost their low-skilled job to automation,
Right.
not to, Mexicans.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but the perception is the reverse. The people that have lost those jobs believe it's because of these bad trade deals and it's because of foreign intervention into our...
Democrats did it.
Yeah, the Democrats. That's right. That's exactly right. And so they tie their frustrations to, it's really easy to, find that scapegoat.
Right.
Yeah. And so what I think people are doing on the individual level is I think they are turning to pain medications, and they're turning to these kind of easy to get opioids that are quite strong. From what I understand from people that I know in my family and friends that know people as well. I don't personally have much experience here, but there's some of these drugs that make you feel pretty damn good. Like, you could take a few of them in the morning, and then especially if you mix them with some alcohol or something like that, mix the drugs with other things.
That sounds pretty deadly.
Yeah.
That's
But-
how come you die.
Yeah.
But it supposedly creates a heck of an anesthetic effect and kind of numbs a person all day long. And if someone is struggling for 6 months, a year out of work, and is having a hard time finding work, and that was their identity,
Yeah.
I think that helped relieve a lot of pain, not just physical pain, but some mental pain as well. So I personally believe that we're going through a transition due to technology in our society. We're transitioning from this old world where things kind of were consistent and you kind of knew what to expect more. into this brave new world where things are much more volatile. Things move at a much faster pace, and it's really hard for human beings and our minds and our culture to make that quick adaptation. And so when something that you had for a long part of your life, that was something you identified with, is gone, right? And you don't have that nostalgia, you don't have like that connection, you kind of feel that zone. In that 40 to 50 something right now is where this crisis is hitting harder than any. It's in that age group.
Age group.
Yeah. And so that's my theory. So now I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. And so this is how this is supposed to work, right? So I put you in the queue now, and so now you come up in the speaking queue. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think that's one factor why men that have worked their careers to the point that they retire die soon thereafter, because that's loss of identity. They feel lost, nothing to do.
Michael?
I did a lot of drugs. I'm pretty sure
You're a
I
subject
did.
matter expert in the room.
I did more drugs than all of you put together between 1966 and 1985.
That explains it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, it does explain a lot, But the fact is that I remember Reefer Madness. School put out made a video to show, or a film at that time, to show children so they would not try reefer.
Right.
Reefer Madness, and it was this stupid movie about all these kids smoking that reefer and going out and committing crimes and everything like that. And then there was some not quite that bad ones that were done later when they said, no, this is a bad lampoon. But the one thing that none of those movies, none of those health classes, none of those health professionals ever said to any of the kids was, well, people do this stuff because it feels really good. And when they tried it themselves and it felt really good, it was like, well, so they lied to us. They must have lied about all of it, because why would you only lie about part of it?
Yeah.
And so you didn't believe anything that the health professionals said about drugs because they were proven liars. You found out later that, well, there were some downsides to drugs. Mostly there was the fact that if you got caught, you'd probably never get a job again. But it was also the fact that regardless of whether it's an actual opioid and has the actual chemical process of progressive resistance to the effect of the drug that goes on, causes you to get addicted in chemical terms, the return on investment for yippee-yahoo drugs of all types is a diminishing curve. It doesn't, you either take more or you don't feel as good. And when you take more, the side effects go up more rapidly than the desired effects. Mm-hmm. And nobody talks to you about that part of it. Nobody talks to you about, yeah, it doesn't feel quite as good as it used to. And the thing is that the exception to that is the cannabinoids, organic grass and hash, not the oils. And once they chemicalized it up, they got by all that, and it was just more of the same as heroin and morphine and stuff. But the fact was that over time, you didn't smoke more and more and more pot. You stayed stoned longer, and you were stoned all the time, but you didn't need as much pot. So it's not something that the economic incentive for the supplier isn't there. You can sell this guy a pound this year, and you can sell him about 3/4 of a pound next year and half pound a year after that. And after that he's got the seeds and he'll grow his own. And, it never had the economic engine behind it. Mm-hmm. And
So
I didn't buy any pot after 1975. I didn't quit until 1985.
You have it on a calendar, do you?
I just remember the days. That was back when my memory was better. But I know that it took me 10 years because I didn't ever have a time when I couldn't have some.
Yeah.
I had to make all new friends. But that's not the way this works.
Mhm.
This works because I go to a doctor
Right.
and he writes me a prescription and a pharmacist fills the thing. And they're all required to fill out forms. And they all know the statistics and they all have PhDs or better. And they all could predict who's an addict and who's not. Every single one of them, all of them could predict who's an addict and who's actually having real pain. But their insurance company's lawyer tells them not to get into that.
Sure.
So this is a manufactured epidemic. And now we have courts ordering people to go into rehab. So we have a side industry going
Sure.
that requires the courts, if the courts didn't order people into rehab, 3/4 of them would never show up again.
Mhm.
This has become an economic engine. And until the economic engine gets derailed, it's going to continue to grow.
So how can we derail that economic engine? I think probably the first.
You're going to hate this answer.
Not get on them to begin with. Right?
Everybody can have any drugs they want after they're 18 years of age, and nobody needs to know anything other than you show the guy your ID, and he sees your picture ID, and you get your drugs, and nobody keeps track.
Yeah, legalization.
Because you need to make, see, you can't make, you can't drive a BMW selling nickel a hit heroin on the, in the schoolyards. Because there's no money in it.
And it's expensive because it's illegal.
And it's only expensive because it's illegal. Heroin would cost a nickel a hit if you bought it by the kiloton.
So the pharmaceutical industry has opened up in the medical industry, as from what I've read and studying this, you're accurate. I mean, that's actually how it happened. I mean, a lot of people got started on, the prescription drugs, and they got to the point where they just needed them, and they stayed on them, and then they couldn't get them. Over time, the doctors will take you off of them because they don't want you to becoming an addict, and now you're hooked and you need an alternative. And so then something really cheap off the street, and you hit some of that, and next thing you know, boy, now you're in a whole other echelon. And so I think that's a common track for a lot of people. And so I also know that a lot of this gets sent back and forth in the mail. People get prescriptions and they sell that by mail.
Oh,
that's another
really?
big thing. Yeah, it's a big thing. People will go and get a prescription not needing it at all. They know what to say to get the prescription
to
the
go friend or
right. So they're working like
Are
a
they
regular
selling
job.
them?
They're an accountant at Duke Energy or something, and they just kidding. And so they have a really good insurance policy. If they go to the doctor, they have a script on what to say, right? They get the medicine, and they have buyers that are willing to spend quite a few dollars per pill.
I remember when I was a teenager, my friends used to go. There was a doctor in the neighborhood or somewhere that everybody used to go to get amphetamines. And I mean, he was given, I don't know who he was. I never went, but all my friends were going there. This was back in the mid-70s.
So speed.
Pills, I think. It wasn't, it was like an amphetamine. So it wasn't coke, it was just,
The yellow amphetamine 5s,
Yeah.
10s, and 20s.
I don't know who this doctor was, but somebody knew who he was and
There was
everybody
one
was going there.
There was one in every major metropolitan area.
So my next question is if we have these kind of drug classifications, okay, where some are known to be highly addictive, and the opioid family happens to be one that's highly addictive, right? Heroin has been around for a long, long time. Lots of people hooked on it. So we have this kind of natural understanding that certain drugs have a high propensity for addiction, right? Opioids are in that family. Now, if the pharmaceutical industry and the doctors or the medical industry collectively have had this years and years now where they have really increased the amount of prescriptions they've been making for these drugs, does that industry have culpability in now treating the addictive, knowing full well, like Michael said, the statistics have been quite clear for a long time on when you give more of these type of drugs, your rate of addiction is definitely going to increase. It has to. It's a must. And so, yeah, Steve.
Yeah, they are culpable for fraud, misrepresentation, promotion of a bad product.
but not serial murder.
Okay. And we'll stop at serial murder. Okay.
I did read an article recently that was talked about the doctors, prescribing, and of course I can't remember everything because my memory's not so good either. But in a way, part of it. They were saying like the doctors have a hard time in the respect that the patients are very the patients have changed. Like the patients now expect to go in and if they have a runny nose, get a prescription, like you were saying earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole gist of the article was that doctors need to be, they were saying, take that paternalism that they used to have and be more like, no, I have to cut you off. I can't give you this. You don't really need this. And what they're doing instead, or what they're doing now that needs to change, is that they just give in. They just give them what they want.
Gotcha.
So I think it's changes in society in a lot of different things that's been a contributing factor also. But yeah, they need to kind of stand up and say, take a stronger stance.
So you
and
think
I mean,
the
I
medical
know,
industry should be ratcheting down on it, like clamping down on it? And
yeah,
not
I mean,
giving
I know
rights?
from experience, my ex-husband was a terrible, very bad alcoholic. I mean, he was drinking a gallon of vodka at a time.
What?
Yeah, he was bad. He's still not well. And I saw him go to emergency rooms, and the guy was so obviously a freaking alcoholic, and they would dump these drugs on him, and I'm like, are these people insane? What do you think he's going to do with this? And I was like stupefied, like I couldn't believe what they would prescribe to him.
So we are kind of in a mutual agreement that the medical industry has had some culpability in the emergence of this problem?
Yep.
I think it's also the fact is that doctors don't have their own practices near as much as they used to. They work for a health maintenance organization, or they work for, and they basically, anybody who the nail hits, the hammer hits the nail that's sticking up the furthest. And if you've got, none of your patients are coming back, they're not coming back because they came to you for drugs and you wouldn't give them drugs, that doesn't show. That just means you have a whole bunch of one-time patients. Whereas Dr. Jones over here, he's got, his patients have been coming to him for years. Yeah, he's a great doctor. He also only spends 8 minutes with each patient.
Right.
And
the prescription pad is going like crazy, right?
And the thing is that if you've got, once they're good at it, the doctors aren't really, they just don't want to spend all of their time on people who just came in here for drugs. And they know that if they get rid of them, there's payback for them. And they don't want to deal with that either, so they just give them the smallest amount of drugs they can convince them to take, and they go away, and then he's got time to spend with, actually being a doctor, because most of them really do want to actually be doctors.
Mhm.
And they, my brother talks about it, and he's an endovascular surgeon, but that's a really expensive thing to do, and not too many people need it, really. And if you're really up on, if you're in the right market, and there's a couple of pro football teams and a couple of, college sports programs in your area, you can probably make a living doing nothing but endovascular surgery. But the rest of the time, the rest of them got to work at doing something, and so they're doing what they can. And there's the second guy down on the stack of who do I refer this guy to. So, yeah, they don't want to spend their time doing, they don't want to be giving people pain that they should be giving surgery to. But the HMO won't pay for surgery until he's tried the drugs. It's a rule. Because the drugs are cheap and the surgery is expensive.
So how about this? How about a couple ideas then that we could, let's say if we were an advisory panel, we're trying to advise society, we're trying to advise the medical industry, right, on what they could do. My first advice that comes to mind would be open up clinics, open up places where people can go and get rehabilitation for drugs, rather than the jails being filled up with drug offenders and all this kind of stuff. Let's at least have some type of infrastructure in place to where someone, no matter what their status is, that finds themselves hooked on some kind of drug, can get some treatment for that, right?
Well, obviously, education is one thing, but who needs to be educated? And in some cases, the children need to be educated. When I say children, I'm talking about young adults whose parents have had pains, surgeries, whatever, all kinds of arthritis, everything. I mean, with the old age, and just the past week, my wife had to notify someone. My wife's a nurse. She needed to notify someone, a young person, who's been complaining about their elderly, who's in a daze in a semi-coma all the time, and she was trying to. My wife was pointed out, hey, she's going to be, she's going to be out of the house for, so many hours. Damn it, get in there and you know where she keeps all her what do you call her medicines. Write down. My wife's telling me, what to write down and so forth, and find out how many, what the label says, how many pills you're supposed to, how often you're supposed to do all this kind of stuff, and the doctor's names, etc. But anyway, then they've got something to work on. Otherwise, adults don't need to tell their kids what all they're doing, what they're taking, and.
So this is interesting about the education piece, Jerry, because these kids are actually getting some education anyway from each other about which drugs are worth a lot of money and which ones to steal from the medicine cabinets. It's a big deal right now. It's a really big deal amongst the youth. They're increasingly knowledgeable about what meds are what.
Obviously, I'm thinking of people who have some control. They need some education.
Who?
Pardon?
Like who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? I wasn't clear on.
Well, I only have one case that I can think of that I tried to explain just now.
Right, okay.
The relatives
Okay.
who would have more concern about what their parents are doing and what the doctor's doing for solutions.
Gotcha. So Bill, what's your take? You haven't gotten on the board yet. You're afraid of getting green? Turning green? You're the only one besides Tiffany that hasn't turned green yet on the board.
Well, first, I don't think I have that much to contribute because in my practice of psychiatry, I did not prescribe such medications and so on. And but I think I noticed you were using the word culpability and so on. I think there is a tendency to look around to see whom to blame, but I think it's probably better to try to understand how it all fits together. There's the problem that some people do have chronic pain, and it's not easy to treat that chronic pain, and also to say, well, the answer is rehab and education and so forth. I think experience is that there's kind of a low rate of success. So some answers are needed that we don't have yet. And I don't claim to have an answer.
So
I think there's so many factors.
So it's definitely a multifaceted problem, for sure.
I would think we'd be getting some information from the when Mary Jane became legal in a number of states, and what the statistics are going to. I mean, which states they're going to have to do this for all the different states. and have analysis that will decide whether or not that's a better solution, the regulations.
Did you read anything on like why, like now we're having such a crisis, like in Ohio and Virginia and some other states, like
All I read
what
was opinions.
precipitated all that?
Yeah, that's actually why I wanted to have that be the lead into the open discussions, because all I was able to find on that was opinions. You know, I hadn't seen any really good social studies showing what in the world's going on. Now, I do know from the statistics that Americans have done the most drugs for quite some time than any other nation, and a lot of it's recreational because a lot of people have discretionary income that they want to feel good, I guess is the term they use. And so they turn to, you know, the recreational drugs, and maybe aren't even addicted. They just do it for fun. They use it to enhance their lives to some extent. And out of America, you have all types of creativity coming from our nation. We're the biggest output. One of the biggest consumer products that we export is our creative arts, our films, our movie industry, our acting, and all those artistic careers. The United States that's one of our major exports.
They're all going to jail.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the next topic.
So the thing about that though is that, you know, this is a real commodity that the United States is pumping out here, which is the creative arts, our music, and our music is, you know, distributed around the world and makes millions internationally.
So,
You know,
how are you connecting that to
Well,
drugs?
these
Because a lot of these people are using drugs too.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
It's well known within the industry, or industry insiders or people that I've talked to, and you know, things I've read too, all line up that industry is very heavy in drug use.
And that's where they get their creativity.
I would assume probably some, yes.
That's where they think
I don't
they
know.
get it. I don't think they actually get it.
Michael, the subject matter expert, are you coming in?
Well, I'm saying that it's a confirmation bias. But take a whole bunch of people who have a lot of creative artistic ability, and they all get together and sit around and smoke pot or do whatever, drink or whatever they do. There's a ferment of ideas that has nothing to do with the drugs. It has to do with the fact that they're all socializing together, and it becomes an industry because the wealthy people who put this stuff together know how to get these people together and get them going. You get them drunk and you have a big party, and and it's not the drugs that make people creative.
Right. I mean, I think that they're born creative. It's a talent, I think. It's like a gene, like someone who can sing or play instruments. That's like a talent.
And there's also a certain amount of suffering that goes with it. People suffer, and it gives them insight. And then some of them take from that insight and their suffering, and they create either music or words or performance. And you see some people do a performance, and even though the character isn't who they are, you can look in that face and know that they're speaking from intimate knowledge of what it feels like to have this suffering. And that's why those particular niches in art aren't destroyed by drug use, because you're not stoned all the time. And so you dump your life in the toilet twice, and you come out of there with a little bit of understanding about human nature. And also you come out regularly able to identify bullshit artists and identify with them and play one in a movie. Or you've seen enough sexual exploitation of innocent people in your life that, yeah, I can play that one too. I can write a story about that one. I can write a book about that, because I'll never tell anybody how autobiographical this book is. I just made it up. I got an idea from a headline or whatever. But a lot of that stuff you read in books is autobiographical. I mean, no, I can't ever let any of you read anything out of the book, but the fact is that all of that part of creativity is not created by the drugs.
Sure.
It's created by the suffering brought about by all of those people that are in that culture, taking advantage of each other, exploiting each other, getting each other drunk and stoned and hooked.
There is some creativity that's happy. It's not all suffering.
Yeah, but that's the gospel music industry and a couple of other places, and that's it, really. And always they say, yeah, heaven's wonderful, but they have better music in hell.
You trying to jump in, Jerry?
Well, just that one thing.
Well, Steve's first.
Just a year or two ago, I attended a summer school
okay.
Class of creative writing, which I had never done in my life.
Cool,
Although
right.
I was a teacher 40 years, English and writing.
Really? Oh, that's so funny.
But never had creative writing. And these are all 60, 70, 80-year-old folks. And to start it off, the professor asked, everybody was retired, in this. Anyway, we were in the mountains. The professor asked everybody to bring the next day. I mean, you were told to bring some of your own writing. They said, and we want each of you to read something that you've selected of your own. And they did. The question after they finished them all, somebody asked this about biographies, and they went around and asked each one, how much of it was biography, and at least 90% for everyone. And,
Who needs fiction when fiction is?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier. I mean, it's pretty damn hard to write about something you've never experienced.
Steve.
The logical fallacy at play was post hoc ergo propter hoc, that the creativity was caused by the drug usage.
Because it happened after the drug usage.
Right. But it didn't cause it, so that's a logical fallacy.
Well, so this whole thing, when I was a child, I was keen on being very much against drugs, right? I had seen firsthand what it did to some people close to my family, et cetera, and so forth. And I took a hard stance against it, like, keep that shit away from me, blah, blah. I wouldn't go as far as to like rat somebody out if they had it or something, just keep it away from me. And everyone knew that I wasn't interested in anything. And even with that, coming up, just as a normal childhood experience, I mean, pretty normal, just growing up in, everyday society, I was available to me all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what your experiences were like, but my gosh, it was always around, one form or fashion. If I really wanted to experiment or get into it, I had plenty of accessibility. And I would imagine that my children are going to be coming up through the same paradigm, not coming from my household, but coming from just the experience at large.
North America.
Yeah, me in North America. So, same time though, I wanted to say that I don't think I have such a hard stance on it anymore. I think there's probably something to be said. I think this is maybe part of the larger fabric of human existence, is the desire for some people to want to try different things, and we're curious creatures, and we do like to have mind-altering experiences. We like to expand ourselves, and we like to kind of experience different things.
Novel experience.
Yeah, we look for crave novel experiences. I think that's a great term. That's perfect. And I think that combined with the prevalence of how available it is, kind of makes sense, puts it all together. Now, when you get into these really things like these opioids and stuff, where once people get going on them, it's just like nightmare trying to get off of them.
I don't know that opioids, I mean, do they really expand your mind though? So much as just kind of make you feel relaxed and happy?
No,
I think they numb you quite a bit.
Yeah, they make you know.
Yeah, but I don't think
make it easier to ignore your problems.
But I know, but I'm saying in terms of actually expanding, like
Well, see, but
I
for some people,
experimented
they're. I'm sorry.
I experimented with several things. I never did a ton of drugs. I did smoke pot for quite a few years growing up, and that's because our actual Y leader who used to sell it to us, he was our dealer. This was in the Bronx. But I took a few other things here and there, and I remember one thing I took that I did feel was mind expanding was mescaline.
Yeah, ain't that some stuff?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Now that's something, but you know, I never took things to extreme, you know, because I don't
Sure.
want to get into like harming myself or anything, but I did that a few times. And always,
So your net effect from that experience, though, it probably didn't physiologically harm you. I don't think you're
I only
addicted to
did
it.
it a few times.
But of those few time experiences, what I'm asking you is that, was it a positive experience?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. I heard the sounds of silence, man.
So there you have,
You know, what is the significance of that?
It was just like kind of fun, you know. It was fun.
It feels good, but the conclusion that it has produced some expansion of the mind is, I think, questionable. Just because
Yeah,
it
I mean, I
feels
don't
that
know,
way.
right, I don't know technically what, as a psychiatrist, you probably understand that better. But yeah, I mean, it felt good, it made me a little more creative, maybe, that kind of thing. Actually, a couple of times I tried, like, when I was in school, I tried speed or whatever, amphetamine, and that helped me to stay up and write papers.
performance enhancing.
Again, I only did these things a few times, that was it. That was done.
I'm not familiar with the sound of silence. What does that sound like?
I don't know. It just sounded pretty cool that night.
Well, is it absolute quiet, or is
I
it?
guess me and my friend were looking out our window, my window.
Okay.
And we
Just-
heard absolute silence.
Complete silence.
Yes. It was pretty cool.
It has a sound.
Steve,
Yeah, that's
but-
like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there, do you still hear it? It's kind of like.
Well, you don't hear it, but yes, it did make a sound.
It doesn't still make a sound.
Well, in a sense, the sensation of significance is just a brain state, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that something is significant.
Notice it
Unless
says
you can
brain
make
state,
it
not
happen in
mind
somebody
state.
else's brain.
Bill believes there's no such
Then
thing
it's
as
called
mind.
creativity.
Oh,
Supernatural.
really?
Yeah.
Well,
So
no, the
Steve-
mind is a supernatural entity, like God.
Exactly.
Well, let's let Steve get his
Yeah.
place
But
in the queue here.
that's probably off topic.
Well,
No, it's okay.
just count this as me talking. I agree with Bill.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my system to work, man. Gotta
Well,
give you some credit here.
You know, I appreciate that. It's a
Because, you know, when we have 30 people, or when we have 20 people, and everyone's trying to get a word in, then this would be really useful. Small group, yeah, it's loose, but,
It's somewhat of an impediment at times.
oh, it will be, yeah. But in a larger format, I think it's gonna give us a useful
It will
tool.
help to give everyone.
But
Well,
I
see-
need the experience to tune it, to get it better.
Well, there's multiple factors here. One is control as to who talks when,
Yeah,
and the other is accounting for who talked and how long.
right.
Two different functions.
Yeah, it's hard to delineate those, isn't it? Yeah. Michael, you're actually next in the queue, so it works out perfect.
I think that creativity has a lot to do with all the euphemisms, thinking outside of the box. And I can tell you that when you're really stoned, whether or not what you're thinking about makes any sense is not a factor. You don't expect it to make
Oh,
sense.
that's like me in the normal. That's
Well-
my normal operating condition.
It does, to a certain extent, that happens as well. You learn not to sieve what you think about according to as time goes by, that criteria that you always sieve for gets looser and looser and looser because you're used to ignoring it. And, well, it makes you weird. It makes you different. It makes people look at you when you say stuff and go, wow, why did you, oh, wow. Where did you come up with that?
And in certain social circles, that's a huge advantage.
Well, for certain processes, it's a huge advantage because the world doesn't make sense all the time. And so being able to stop making sense as an act of will is a hard skill to learn. But it's easy when you're stoned. Because you have to, all you have to do is stop trying really hard to think like a straight person.
Right. So let me put this out. Does the prevalence, this idea of hey, here's your 18-year-old card, right? All you got to show is your ID, and boom, you get whatever drug you want. Okay, let's say we did move to that scenario. do we kind of have an understanding that the prevalence of drugs being so easily readily available all over the place is going to have a tendency to have more people using them? Is that just true, or is that a logical fallacy, you think?
I think you have to wait until after the spike to find out, because there's going to be a spike. Suddenly it's no problem, go get drugs. And there's a lot of people who would get more drugs if they could get more drugs. But they're going to get enough drugs after a while.
Mm.
And there's going to be a spike in deaths. Among casual users, there's going to be a lot more overdoses. I don't think that lasts over time, but that's just my guess. I think that comes back
What
down.
all the drug cartels do?
Well, see, that's what happens is the guys in the Lexuses selling drugs at the elementary school, they're going to disappear pretty quick, because and of course I don't think you should make it legal to sell to children.
No, of course not. You said 18.
Yeah, and I think that you should quadruple the penalties existing for selling drugs for anyone who sells them to people who aren't. Let's say it's 20 years for the first offense of selling to a child.
Well, we kind of know, though, that I don't want to be the one to disrupt and have to count my time double. Here's what happens, by the way, in this app. If you interrupt, if you interrupt, you turn orange and your timer starts going like crazy.
I think I interrupted around 20 times already.
No, no, like short outbursts don't matter. Yeah. So there is pretty clear evidence, though, that the incarceration and the penal system that exists right now for offenders, drug offenders, isn't a deterrent at all. There's still drugs being sold all over the place all the time. So no matter how steep the penalties are, it doesn't seem to have an effect on.
Well, yeah, but that guy won't be doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Not the kids, because there
Sure.
are no kids in prison.
So you have Steve, then Jerry.
No, pass it.
Pass. All right, Jerry.
Oh,
Surprise.
you were talking about, you were asking, what if maybe sometime in the future we don't have regulations for this. One example that we can take from the past, I was teaching abroad at an international school, high school age, and these kids when they had when they were partying, had beer and just beer and soda, no hard liquor, but beer and soda, whatever drinks were available during holidays, and the Americans thought, oh, this is an opportunity for, they weren't even 18 years old, high school age kids, and the kids from these other countries where they didn't have those regulations, they never dreamt of, I mean, if we have a beer, we have a beer. This notion of how many you can drink is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would think that there's a possibility that, and some countries do that already. They don't penalize people for using.
But is that just alcohol or drugs also?
Alcohol's a drug.
You ask?
Is it just alcohol or is that drugs too? Different kinds of drugs?
My example,
Was just out drinking?
it was not, no, drugs weren't a thing back in those days.
Yeah.
So let me kind of take the summary of what you were saying, Jerry. Is like basically what you're saying is that if it's kind of normal and it's available all the time, it doesn't have a premium on it, as much of a premium on it.
Yeah,
And therefore,
if it's illegal, there's all the more reason to.
Yeah.
okay. I think it's a valid point to raise. I mean, definitely. I think that's a valid point. Steve?
Yes, you had asked earlier about what would happen if drugs were illegal.
Mm-hmm.
My thought is it would be like guns. Anybody wants it can have it, okay? But that doesn't mean they're going to use it. It could be stuffed in the closet, in the drawers, whatever. It's there. They can use it whenever they want to, but they probably won't.
Why do you say that?
Personal experience. I have a stockpile, but I never use it. So, I imagine others have stockpiles too. I mean, I had both parents, and they were both sick, and stuff got left over.
Okay.
American alcoholic consumption increased during every year of Prohibition. And when Prohibition was repealed, there was a spike, and then it went back to pre-Prohibition time. Didn't ever go all the way back down to what it was during the days of Demon Rum and all of that sort of stuff, pre-Prohibition. But it went back down, and it never got as high as it was during Prohibition. Still isn't. Illegal Prohibition makes things, I mean, you can't tell me I can't drink. I'll show you, I'll drink. I don't think that it's ever worked anywhere. And the interesting thing is that after Prohibition was repealed, we had the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and we had the FBI, which were dealing with the largest criminal organization in the world's history, and they suddenly had no laws to get them on. And Henry Enzinger just lobbied and advertised and hired people to prove that marijuana was a demon. And that's where it all started. It started with a prohibition on marijuana and opium. And there wasn't any morphine. I mean, yeah, there was such a thing, but there was a medical drug. Nobody did morphine. And they passed a bunch of laws to give that agency control over those drugs. And so all those cops still had jobs. And all those criminals still had jobs.
So, speaking specifically to that, I was in the military and I was over in Afghanistan. And when pre-war, our invasion, the heroin yield coming out of there, the actual processing of the poppies, was down to a historic low. Okay, like close to zero. Under Sharia law, the Taliban had taken over the government, and they had the authority. They'd placed a law throughout the nation that if you get caught growing heroin, growing poppies, you were done, executed, like you're killed. And the whole beheading thing and all that kind of fun stuff. And so it didn't take long for many people to decide it wasn't in their best interest to continue to grow poppies. And so the yield went down to historic almost zero, got close to zero. And then of course we invaded and took over, and next thing you know, it's up at historic highs again. Not to make a pun on highs and lows, but the point is that where that drug is consumed more than anything else in the world is right here on the streets of America. So we had an opportunity when we went in there to continue to not allow that crop to come back. We had full jurisdiction over the country. We could do martial law. We could have done anything we wanted to. But for some reason, maybe it was just not considered. Maybe it was something that just the people that strategically do the war planning didn't put that into the plan. But I find that hard to believe. These aren't dumb people.
But I mean, we would never threaten beheading, and so people wouldn't.
Yeah.
The fear wouldn't be the same because they know.
Sure.
They know that the Taliban or whoever it was would actually behead them and execute them.
Right.
Whereas
My
even
point
if we
is-
said it was illegal, they wouldn't be quite as threatened.
Yeah, well, we didn't make any claims of it being illegal. We didn't have a stance on it. We were after the
Right.
military objective. And the plants just came back sky high. And, like I said, there was now the actual problem with the actual insurgency, if you will, was coming primarily from Pakistan, people coming over the border, and they weren't religious fanatics looking to kill Americans. They were mafia, they were drug runners. Because this represents billions of dollars in our economy, every year. So you think that these drug runners from Pakistan, where they have these big processing facilities, aren't going to come to Afghanistan, get the product and bring it back and manufacture it and distribute it to the whole world? Of course they are, because there's billions of dollars to be made in this. So the point is like somehow that stuff finds its way all the way back to America on our streets, and is cheap drug that which people that are addicted to the opiates can can consume. And it almost seems as if it's part of a plan is what I'm getting at. And I'm not going to try to get into a conspiracy theory because I don't want to seem like a nut. But at the same time, there's our facts that we have to reconcile here. The technology exists to know every text message that I send on my phone. Okay? Every phone call that I make can be recorded and monitored. It's all digital now, and they have computers that are all networked and interconnected, and they've had this for years. They even had it back when the old phone, when it was a plain old telephone system, copper wires. They had huge centers. AT&T had these huge centers, but they had a secret room where they just tapped the hell out of those lines. So this has been happening forever. And so what I'm trying to get at is that my internet traffic, my text messages, my phone records, my position, my location services are on all the time on my phone. It's very easy to know who I am, what I'm doing, and where I'm going all the time, right?
Big Brother knows.
Big Brother knows damn well what I'm doing in my life. And sorry for them, it's kind of boring, but at the same time, it's pretty clear the technology is there for them very well to know. And what came out with Edward Snowden is that the data, the canvassing of that data is being done, okay? So my point is like, if all these people are hooking up drug deals, and if you watch a drug dealer, they're chatting with people on their cell phone.
Yeah.
They're getting text messages. Hey, can I come? Can I get something? Something. You know, sure. Meet me at blah blah blah. So the infrastructure is completely in place to really crack down on drugs.
Right.
The source of the world's overwhelming majority source of heroin, okay, is Afghanistan. That's a fact. We had for several years, and still do likely, complete control over the country. What goes in, what comes out. We had drones flying all over the place. We knew who was moving when. I can tell you this is true because I was there. We knew who was moving. You know, if a camel farted, we'd know it. I mean, it's like, we know. We have eye in the sky. We know who's moving where, key signature technology. I mean, we got it, okay? I believe very much so that we know what's coming in and out of our borders, from where and in what quantities. These electronic port scanners that have these big cargo containers come off, they x-ray the whole dang thing. And it's not that hard to find certain patterns of, you know, chemicals will give certain signatures on these things, and it can be done all automated. And so I'm of the opinion that it's pretty well understood on what's happening, what's going on in the world, yet it continues to just be allowed to happen. Yeah. So I think then the next kind of, where it does get into the cross the line of conspiracy theory, is I think there's one of two possibilities. The first possibility is that it's just too big and nobody can control it, and so they say don't try. They say let's let the status quo be as is because at least we can deal with the kind of regularity of it, right? And then there's that possibility, and then there's the second possibility where somebody's involved with it. And it's actually like to where, you know, those drugs hitting the streets and having an effect is a desired effect.
Like who would that be?
Well, I think maybe the reason these doctors have been running their prescription pads like crazy since the 70s, which has gotten this big trend in addiction to these pharmaceuticals, definitely is a profit motive.
Yeah.
There's a profit motive. You know, these drugs are synthetically made for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
They're and what we were saying about the legalization is the cost of them goes down to almost zero. You know, because most of these drugs are just super cheap to manufacture, to cultivate and manufacture, or to make synthetically. So the point is like, there's a really large industry with lots and lots of cash moving through it every year, and I don't imagine people that are real movers and shakers would not have their hands somehow into that pie. Yeah. It just seems too big, you know. So we talked about conspiracy theories one time, and this has all the trappings of a conspiracy theory.
The thing is that the conspirators aren't all in on it. There's the anti-drug conspirators in Congress and in city. These people are rabidly anti-drug, and they want to punish the drug users and the drug dealers. Mm-hmm. But they don't mind the drug manufacturers all that much, because that's the pharmaceutical industry. First of all, I got in office with their money. So it's a matter of identifying the interest. And the fact is that when they shut down Afghanistan as the source of poppies and opium, that lasted for probably 2, maybe 3 years. And then Laos and Myanmar were back in full production. and the line got the caravan got a little shorter, and they caught back up. And then Mexico found out there's parts of Mexico where you can grow great poppies, just about like it is in Afghanistan. And
is that why it's so big in Afghanistan? Because they have the right.
They have the right climate.
Okay.
It's they've been doing it longer than anyone. The Silk Road. It took silk and camel hair and lots of other stuff and plenty of opium in both directions.
Right.
China had an opium addiction problem in 1100
Wow.
AD. They got rid of it and then they got it back, and then they got rid of it again and got it back. So
Do they have it now?
I don't know. I haven't followed
hear
China
that.
much lately. I know they got it back when the British went in there because the British brought it from India. But it's always been about economics. The reason the British brought it was because the Chinese absolutely insisted on being paid in gold. And so in order to get the gold, we had to take silver to India because the Indians had gold, and there's just this triangular trade of gold for silver for opium, for gold for silver for opium, and then all you need is sailing boats. And you got a lot of money, and they're not interested in addiction. They don't care about addiction. They're not interested in the silver mines. They're not interested. They're interested in profit.
It's just
That's
a
it.
commodity to trade like anything else.
It's a commodity, and that's what opium has been for a very, very, very long time.
So, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I had this friend of mine that is really very different from me. And we went to private school together back in the day, and we've been keep in touch over the years. And we get together every now and then and just talk about our lives and have really, really cool conversations because we have completely different. Our lives are both tracking in completely different ways. And he said, in questions like these, when we're raising in this kind of discussion, he said, you can open your eyes to the world as soon as you do one thing, and that is just look at people as commodities and don't look at them as human beings. For once in your life, do that, and then every single thing that goes on around you will start to make crystal clear, perfect sense. And I told him he was an a-hole, and you can't talk like that. That's what your problem is. Blah blah. This nice little banter back and forth.
And that'll stop them from doing it.
Yeah, no, it won't stop him at all. Right? Just double down, probably on his ideas about me. But there's it's playful. It's playful respect, but at the same time, we inspire each other, right? And so it's a good dynamic. And I tried. I did that mental exercise, as he said, and I think there's a lot of value there. So if you do kind of look at the world and be able to put on a lens where if you were to be some type of planner, you're planning on how you want things to unfold and go down. Instead of looking at people as flesh and blood, emotional beings, if you just look at them as like a resource, right? It's a commodity. Then all these structures that are kind of in place make sense. There's a reason why there's a fast food place on every corner and then a medical facility to treat you for your foodborne illness. You know what I mean? It's a structure that makes you when you go to A, you then have to go back to B, and then B is going to ping you to C, and your life then is commoditized. So it's almost like you become a resource for all these different industries and institutions, and you put in your hard work, you get your pay, and then your pay is skillfully withdrawn from you to all these institutions as well. And so what's happening to us in America? The number one thing is still the fork and the knife is our biggest enemy, right? So it's the food that's killing us. The obesity and all these other things, these heart-borne illnesses, due to I think what Bill would say about added fats to foods and all these things that go into our food. The chemical shitstorm, I've heard it called before. Yeah. I think Tiffany used that term of what we call food in modern industrial society, where food is just commoditized as well, makes us sick as hell, right? And we get all these circulatory issues because we're pumping our bodies full of garbage, right? And then there's a whole huge industry ready to just treat that.
Yeah.
So then, it also causes all types of these things like the uptick in arthritis and all these inflammatory diseases that you get as a result of taking the kind of food supply that we have. So you kind of you are what you eat type thing. Sends us to now go to the doctor with our really bad joint pain, and there's the prescription. You see what I'm saying? Then the drug company cashes in. If you have insurance, that's even better. They cash in, and so I can just see it as like this revolving door of one thing into another. You know, one little kind of spin that you have, and then you call that a life.
So
It just
you're
seems
talking
like
it's
it's-
a system.
Yeah, I see it as like a network system, and capitalism kind of just in and of itself will predicate something like that anyway, right? Because if there's a business that can be made from something, someone
I
will
can
make that
loan them
business.
some money.
Yeah, that's right. So, kind of the things about our society that I believe are, and I know I'm preaching a little bit, but it's okay. Is no one had their hand up, so I'll take the floor for a few minutes. But anyway, so what I'm getting at here is that this capitalism in and of itself doesn't have this kind of sacred domain, okay? And what I mean by sacred domain is like things for our children and things for our health and wellness, food, clothing, shelter, all the medicine, things that people really need, the basics, are now subject to these same market influences as everything else, as an iPad. You see what I mean? And so in my opinion, the iPad should be the Wild West. You should have a bunch of vendors competing for your iPad dollar, right? But when it comes to good quality, wholesome food, which is very nourishing for our bodies, and it's good for human consumption, I don't know if that should be something that we turn over to market influence, market forces. I don't think that's necessarily the domain of capitalism. I think that maybe is like a sacred domain, which we make sure is protected and does us well as our medical system, not just turn this all into money-making engines, one after the next after the next. Yeah, their soapbox has been removed. Yes, please, Michael.
Capitalism is inherently unethical.
Unethical?
Unethical, yes.
New word.
It cannot have ethics. It is not able to maintain ethics. Ethics cost money.
It's a
And there's no profit in it.
There's a net effect, though, right?
Well, see, the thing is that the net effect has to be recordable in dollars and cents per time period, or it has no value.
So if I get everyone hooked on opiates, that's good for my bottom line.
That's exactly what it is. And ethics aren't good for your bottom line. And there are cases where that is true, but they're rare, they're few and far between. And they require the consumer to be an ethical consumer. And I'm sorry, that's a boat which sailed long ago. The American consumer, well, first of all, how soon can I have it? That's the number one. Where can I get it now?
Amazon has it down to 2
Do you
hours
deliver?
now.
Yeah, it's all about
I've gotten
convenience.
same-day delivery. I thought that was pretty amazing.
It is.
Yeah, and see, free delivery. That's such a joke.
But same-day delivery.
Yeah, okay, see, same-day delivery is, I get to charge you more
No,
for
no,
what I
it was-
probably would have done anyway, because the guy coming out here is coming,
It was
that
free.
whole thing about free delivery is such an absolute scam.
Isn't everything, though? It's
But everything is a scam.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
what I'm
fact
saying,
is
trappings
that
of
it's all
capitalism.
about the convenience, because Americans won't wait 5 minutes more than they have to
That's true.
for a 50% discount. I can have it now, or I can have it in 5 minutes for half that price. I'll take it now.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'd wait 5
I can give you 100% pure organic, or I can give you garbage off the street in 5 minutes. I'll take the garbage, please. Can I have it now? We have the worst consumers in the world for their own benefit. Nobody cares about. People don't even read the labels they don't know what it says on that label. It's written in little tiny letter, and nobody reads them. And if you do read them, people look at you like you're weird. Well, because the law says it has to be wholesome. Right, and who defined that? There's a committee in Congress that decided that. And their lobbyists told them that this was the truth. We have a democracy, and democracies get the government they deserve.
So I agree with everything you just said. Pat?
So, I find it, depressing that the state of the world now, it seems like we could never get it to be really good. You know, everything is so ingrained.
Has to crash.
Well, I think that a little differently about that in next week's topic. I'm not trying to sell you on next week, but next week's topic is about that exact thing.
Okay.
Is that I don't think at all that it's trending negatively at all. I think it's trending positively, and I don't really believe that it's really fair to identify myself as kind of a singular person, because everything I do every day involves other people and technologies and other systems, and we'll talk about that next week on how there's this big, actually like matrix, if you will, of technology that we exist in always, right? And so therefore it becomes a part of actually who we are, like the human species as a whole. I'm calling it Homo technus, because like we've kind of moved past the Homo sapien domain and we're entering into this new domain that I'm calling Homo technus. And we're replacing the Homo sapiens of the past. And I'm going to demonstrate that next week on why we're into a new echelon or a new era of our evolution.
So you feel positive about the future?
Oh yeah, very much so. I think I do, and I think if we get it wrong though, we can go and it could be really, really bad. Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be both.
Yeah, it already is, right?
I think it's Morlocks and Eloy.
Yeah.
You think what?
Morlocks and Eloy
Oh, I don't know.
from the
what that
Time
is.
Machine.
Oh, okay.
The Morlocks going to be
Right now we see the division in the world, and you know we'll talk about that in detail. But so the last segment on this opioid thing is I always like to try to remember to always bring it back with like, so what should be done or what could be done. And so for me, I particularly believe they are illegal. Buying, you know, smack off the street and all that kind of stuff is illegal. And the things that happen that you see happen every day in the news and in society at large, and things that you probably have had come close to your family, if not in your family directly, you know, somebody very close, have been hurt or injured by drug violence, or have become addicted and had their lives kind of swept away from them. Right? I can think of several people in my family and close to my family. I can see Steve counting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a real thing. You know, this is around us and it's prevalent, and it does create a lot of harm. Now, conversely, it's probably not fair to give drugs just such a bad shake. I think maybe drugs have definitely. We know for sure that drugs used as medicines definitely have improved people's quality of life, and perhaps drugs that are used in recreation to some extent have really enhanced people's social experiences and maybe enhanced their lives in some way. Experiences that they are stuck out in their mind as very profound and wonderful experiences might have come through the process of using recreational drugs or experimenting with a group of friends. And so there's probably something, I don't think we'd be doing our children, I think we're doing our children a disservice if we don't speak to that side of it, because then I think like Michael was saying, is if you get, then they find out on their own, they're like, woohoo, this is great. So like to not hide that fact. So like, you know, there's a reason why so many people do drugs, and they feel good, and there might be a social uptick that we do benefit to some extent through the use of drugs. I'm not sure what that is. I haven't researched that profoundly, but I think it might exist. I feel like it. I feel that my intuition says that it exists. There's some positive value to it as well, is what I'm getting at. And so lastly, yeah, sure. So in my opinion though, since drugs are illegal, I don't want to participate in that illegal underworld. I don't want to have somebody shot in a drug trade, you know, and part of that supply was coming to me. I just don't want to get into this nonsense. That stuff turns me off, and I'd like to do what I can by just staying away from this stuff to not contribute to that realm. So, and I don't feel as if I'm losing out on that much.
Right.
You know, Steve.
Well, we have instances of legal drugs such as tobacco for nicotine, and beer and wine and hard liquors for alcohol.
Caffeine.
And well, yeah, caffeine, but that's kind of a minor thing. But
Still good.
take someone's coffee away and they'll fight you. Also, marijuana has now become legal in some areas, and it's regulated and taxed. You know, they're all taxed. So we could use the same approach for opioid medications, where we standardize it, we distribute it, we control it like any other, you know, over-the-counter drug, So it's readily available to those that are mature enough to make the decision to buy it and use it if they want to. And make a profit off of it to establish some kind of control mechanism. And that way you wouldn't have the problem of, well, I don't really know what's in this drug I'm taking, you know, and I don't really know the dosage and strength of it, and you know, will this kill me or not? And
Right.
I don't know. So it's a risk. But if you know what it is, standardized, then that eliminates that particular risk. But you still have the risk of, do I take it or not? And what if I'm addicted to it? Then you have the addiction centers where you get treated for it. And if it's beyond your control, then you have someone take you over and control your custodial environment.
Fair enough. Can we go around and we'll end with you, Michael? Pat, what's your, just not to call you out, but like, I just want to go around because there's not much time left. What do you think can be done about the opioid crisis, and like, how do you think we can trend it so that in the future, hopefully it's not as bad as the way it seems to be trending?
Well,
Any
I
ideas?
think something along the lines of what Michael and Steve are saying, like taking it out of that illegal realm, which is where all the drug dealers come in, and you know, it gets to the wrong people. I mean, so something along that lines. I'm not sure what the perfect answer is, but I think that could be one way of like bringing it out of crisis mode.
Jared, you talked about education as being a big factor.
Well, I like the idea of what we've seen with smoking and some other areas, so that I can picture in the future that things could take care of themselves to some extent. We could facilitate it like we did with smoking. I think that Facebook and all these other things have made it possible for us to suddenly open up people's minds to homosexuals from what our thoughts were just 2-3 years ago, whether we all agreed that it was a mental condition. These people are warped, and now it seems to me we've come to accept them so readily. I just think that social media can maybe facilitate some different insights on drugs, and I don't know what the statistics are as far as less smoking going on in the U.S., but it's certain. I think it's phenomenal. I think those statistics could have been thrown in and used as part of our substance for the...
Yeah, the nicotine, it probably should have too, because nicotine actually has some of the similar chemical receptors to
I'm an ex-smoker.
yeah.
I smoked for like 35
Yeah,
years.
it hooks into the very similar or some of the same receptors as the other enes, the codeines, and the Anyway, Bill.
Well, I don't think there's like one answer, like doing one thing is going to make a real significant difference with regard to making something legal or not. The food that we eat that causes enormous amounts of pain, suffering, disability, and early death is not controlled legally. There's not a punitive response and so forth. I think that one major factor in the difficulty that we have is our continuing or our not yet realizing that punishment essentially makes things worse. But just eliminating punishment, of course, is not going to solve things. I think that the question, what we're talking about is behavior that causes pain, suffering, disability, and early death. In this case, we're talking about drugs, or we could be talking about what we eat, or various things. And we do these things because they feel good, they feel right, maybe the culture supports them, so on. But the basic thing that is corrective of all of that is ethics. In other words, our beliefs about what we should and should not do. And we have a very disorganized and ineffectual set of ethical beliefs and ethical philosophy and so forth. It's very tribalistic and so forth, and so I think that the ultimate answer has to be that we have to develop a better basic ethical philosophy worldwide, and we're a long, long way from that. So
that sounds good. Yeah, I think that's true.
So I'll let Michael get the last word. My 10-second thing is going to be definitely a complex thing directly related to opioids. I would like to know more about the cause. I wish our government would, or someone would step up and help figure out why people are moving in that direction at such a pace is quite alarming. And I think knowing why could then lead to better countermeasures to help change it, reverse course. Yeah. Michael, take us home, please.
I think there's a few things about the opioids. We've gotten pills is becoming the way of taking your drugs nowadays. There was a long time when the opioids were almost all one form of injectable or another, and then we had AIDS, and that was an organic negative reinforcement on everyone in the world who thought about shooting up. It didn't affect the addicts much, but people didn't start. However, it didn't take long for them to get over it, because those things, when you have 1% of the people who are injectable regular drug users are going to get exposed to AIDS, of whom a third are going to end up getting AIDS, being AIDS positive, and a quarter of those sometime in the next 10 years. Well, it's just too nebulous. Nobody worries about it until they actually get back the thing that says, yeah, you got it. But in 1981, a member of I can't remember which agency it was, but a low-ranked doctor who had been doing a lot of research said we could pay for the manufacture and distribution at cost of 60% of an LD 50-50 lethal dose of heroin for $1.50 an injector, and you can't reuse them. And it would stop the spread of AIDS. He wasn't talking about dealing with the opium problem at all.
Right.
He said, but it would stop the you know. But no, we had to stop people from selling injectable needles so that the addicts would reuse them. Couldn't have planned it better as a vector for AIDS and hepatitis. And then we developed a whole new strain of hepatitis not long after that, of hepatitis C, which is also incurable. So our response to these types of things couldn't have been designed better to increase the amount of pain, suffering, disability, and early death. We had a suggestion that would have, 1980 would have been the last time people heard about injectable drug users being a source of AIDS in our society. They wouldn't have done it. And everybody who knew anything about the science knew that that was correct. But it didn't matter, because you can't get elected if you're not hard on drugs.
So there seems to definitely be a system of control in one form or fashion of some type, omnipresent. Yeah. I'm not going to try to get into the conspiracy theory world now.
We're running out of time.
And we're out of time. Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks. That was it. That was episode 30 of Nova.Social. So
We're getting good at it.
yeah, we also have another 500 pounds of food that's going next week.
Wow.
Going where?
So Second Harvest is one of our programs,
Oh, okay.
and they just put our signs up on Tuckasegee Road for the Adopt a Highway or
Oh.
Adopt a Road. Those signs are up. I was going to bring photos, but there's been bad weather.
I donate to them too, and I usually do like through Duke, if you donate up to a certain amount, like
Uh-huh.
a minimum of a certain amount, they match it, and that's one of the organizations I usually.
So far we've done one roadside cleanup. We've collected 494 pounds, and we're about to have another 500 pounds.
Wow.
Food go to Second Harvest.
Are jars okay?
Oh yeah.
Glass is okay?
Yep, everything is okay.
So where do you collect it? Here?
We do. We ask as like an entry fee for every time 2 cans.
Okay.
You know, is like no. I mean, it's optional.
No,
you know, it's like a
okay.
Two
suggested.
containers.
Yeah, 2 containers. Yeah.
There's also an
And what
envelope
about
for monetary donations.
Bottled
Okay.
water, is that,
Right there.
does that count?
There's a list. I think
Oh.
I'll have Sue reprint the list. I'll pass it around next week.
What sort of food?
Yeah, what they're looking for. Their most potent thing is cash because they can buy bulk. That's it's 7 pounds per dollar of every dollar of food. They guarantee 7 pounds of food is delivered. So
Will they take cookies?
someone might take cookies. So yeah, we did that. We have a roadside cleanup thing. So that's 4 times a year that happens. We did it once already, so we're ahead of the schedule on that. Michael participated in that. It went really well. We pulled 50 full bags, not like 50 bags, 50 full-size garbage bags of trash off the streets just down the road here.
Who participated in that?
Me, my family, a couple friends, and Michael. Yeah, we had about 8 people. Yep.
When you
So
do
we're
that kind of stuff, do you do it under your nonprofit organization?
Yes.
Because at Duke, if you log volunteer hours
Uh-huh.
up to a certain, when you get to a certain point,
Yes.
they actually give you, they call it a cause card,
Yes.
and it's $100 that I can then donate to an organization.
Yes,
So
this
I've
is a-
gotten a few of those just from doing volunteer work.
Oh yeah, you can count this time too. The time that we spend here, it's broadcasted. This is educational material. This is an educational related event. This is a nonprofit function that we do.
Oh,
when we come
okay.
here.
So it would be,
You can count those hours.
would it be under the name Nova.Social?
That's the program name. The charity is called USA Web School.
Okay,
Yeah.
because then I can do that, and then when I reach a certain point, they just automatically send me
Yeah, and
this card.
the
It's
the
like
logs
an
through
e-card.
Meetup count as the validation too.
Okay,
So like you can count those legitimate volunteer hours.
okay.
Time spent here because we're using this to educate. It's community awareness, community education program, and Nova.Social has a connection into the community as part of the mandate, the mission of it.
I think
the
as
group.
long as it's registered as a nonprofit,
It is, yeah.
it'll count.
Yeah,
So,
this is a full-fledged 501(c)(3).
okay.
Is there any way to donate your volunteer hours to somebody else?
I don't know. I do tutoring, so you can, if you're interested in doing some type of tutoring.
No, I mean, if I'm counting these as, if all this time is volunteer hours,
Uh-huh.
and I get credit for volunteer hours, can I donate the credit to somebody else?
I don't know. I don't know. Let's work on some way to make something like that possible. That'd be kind of cool. Imagine if someone would sponsored your time, and they did like a dollar match or something, and then you get to decide where that dollar match went. Something like that would be
Well,
great.
that's what I'm saying Duke does.
Yeah.
Like when I
Well, see,
submit.
that's why I would do it. I could have her, she could get credit for all
No,
my
I
hours.
don't think I
Oh,
could,
I don't know
I don't
about
think
that,
I
yeah.
could do that.
Too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, Microsoft does a dollar per dollar match. So if like at Microsoft, if you make, let's say you make $30 an hour, right?
Right.
If you go someplace and donate an hour of your time, they'll donate on top of your time another $30,
Oh,
your
really?
hourly rate
Oh, no,
to the
that they
charity.
don't do. That's
to
an
the actual
interesting
charity.
idea.
Yeah.
But I was able to, because I did tutoring last year. I tried to do it again this year, but I don't know what happened. But so that, and then I do various volunteer things throughout, like with, what's that one, youth, can't think of the name of it now.
Boys Town?
No, it's like a youth place right here in Charlotte where, like, kids that have to get out of their house for a night or two.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's called the Relatives.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I've
I'm
done
familiar with
that,
one.
Girls on the Run. And I actually volunteered at the Panther Stadium one day. That's 5 hours at a time.
So there's gonna be a third arm to what we're doing. We have the community outreach of the area beautification. We adopted the street. We did that. We have this Second Harvest Food Bank thing, collecting food for the hungry. And the third thing is going to be to do with retirement, like aged care, retirement home stuff.
Oh.
And the program that we're doing there isn't been fleshed out yet, but something will happen now. That's
Don't you
Tiffany's.
find somebody who doesn't qualify to be living there? I'm looking around. You know, they're not going to get all that thrilled when I walk in. The nurse is going to, you need a chair, sir?
You try to leave and they
Yeah,
grab you for escaping. Like,
Yeah.
he's trying to escape. Cool. So there's yeah, that's the nice thing about this is that we have that tie through. So everyone felt like they could. We're out of time anyway, but does everyone feel like they could get it?
Who won?
Their
Well,
voice could be heard. I won. I got the most time.
Yeah,
So
but
I
I
rated
have-
your timer by
I
accident
have-
several times.
An observation.
Yeah.
At least 4 times, I think more than that, but there were like 4 times when you were talking, it was being credited to Michael.
Or
And
vice
when-
versa.
And when Michael was talking, it was being
Yeah.
credited to
It's hard
you.
for me to keep my mind going, and so I
Yeah,
needed
you need a
someone to
scorekeeper.
run the scorekeeper. Yeah, that was I
So-
already knew that.
Okay,
But
so.
thanks for pointing it out. Anyway.
So
It's not.
you
so-
need a person to be.
No, I'm
No,
trying
no,
to use
you need
technology.
software.
I have was talking to Ben about writing an algorithm that can automatically detect who's talking because the mic has stereo. It's a stereo mic, so it can, since it's on a 2-dimensional plane, it can know who's talking based on where the voice sound is coming from and automatically credit the time. So all I'd have to do is lay out who's where in the map, and then it would just put who's ever closest to the sound. Yeah.
Then that's really much better.
Yeah. Well.
Because then the interruptions get logged as interruptions every time.
Yeah, or somebody can volunteer to do the thing. Not someone from this group. I mean, someone can come in specifically to help with the audio visual piece. Why not? This is a charity event, so someone can come do it because it takes some time to write that kind of software.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
I mean, just to do this was substantial timing. It took a substantial time, but it worked. If I were to be able to be diligently keep up with it perfectly, But the cue raising thing is nice. So like. Right now, I would have like Michael and I would have the highest time. So see, if someone with less time than Michael goes in the queue, they go first. So see, Bill, you have less time, right? And Jerry has a little more than you, but Jerry has less than Chris and Michael. So if I put Jerry in the queue, he goes right to the top. So it'd be like if you raise your hand to speak. Since you have the least amount of time, your name goes all the way to the top of the list, right? So the incentive is to keep your time short so that when you want to speak, you can.
Brevity
Well,
is the soul.
okay, so the technology would call upon the person.
No, the
Would
person
recognize the raising of the hand? In
No,
other
it
words,
still takes an
seems
MC.
like-
It still takes a human. Yeah, still takes a human master of ceremony to kind
Okay,
of.
so I'm a little
Each one has to
skeptical
have their own
as
button they
to
can
whether
put
anybody
everything.
could see a significant increase in value in this discussion because of that.
Well, the
Do you want to be?
the only thing that we're trying to quell.
Thank you.
Technology is always like this. You solve one problem and you might introduce additional problems. But so you have to keep that in mind when you're introducing technologies. But the idea here is just to stop someone from feeling that they couldn't talk.
I did it at Baruch College.
This I believe
I was working
solves that
full-time,
problem.
and I
If someone
didn't
feels like they
get
can't get a word in
space.
edgewise, they raise their hand and their name is at the top of the list, they now have my top priority to call on them to speak.
So it requires a person calling.
Yeah, well, I'm the MC, so, it
Yeah.
still takes my social skills as a orator and as a manager, I guess, whatever you want to call me, as a leader of the group, to still make
Sure
those
you made it
those
through
distinctions, yeah.
I think
Here
that
anyway.
there's another simpler way, and that is
Yeah.
just raising the issue every now and then in the group, like, we are having a problem that some people would really like to speak, but they're not getting a chance to. How do we feel about that, and how how much should we become aware of that and kind of govern ourselves
I'm more retirement.
through consideration for other people. So,
Yeah. For me personally, Bill, like I might get in a rhythm of speaking, right? I'm like, my mind is like on a theme, and I'm going and going, and I could speak for 5-6 minutes easily and not know I took 5 or 6 minutes. And I think other people can do that as well. And so I think the tool, if used properly, and we'll get it better and better. I think if used properly, it can really help people also inform individuals at how much they're actually talking. Some people might think they're talking a lot too, and come to find out they're not saying much at all. So,
But that,
and vice versa.
yeah, vice versa.
but that, doing that
So they just both passed away.
causes a inconsideration.
So you want
Some
just get
people
used to it. Not-
don't need to talk.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
And,
probably exhausting, I would think.
Some people like to think a lot
Yeah.
Fair enough.
before they speak, whereas some
It's
people don't
expensive,
need
yeah.
time to.
Sure, they're
Like,
also
putting
the
drawing
nature of
on
the
or
system
something
too.
together,
Will
it's like
when
crazy.
someone doesn't speak that often, if they're more quiet and kind of think, and write stuff down, and they're thinking,
Yeah.
then when they decide they do want to say something, right, and they haven't spoken much at all, their voice will be heard because they'll get them right to the top of the list. That's the idea. So when someone is ready to participate, that doesn't participate often, they can get in because there's
It
not
doesn't,
20 people ahead of them.
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah, yeah.
penalize them for not,
Yeah.
there's no penalty in this system for not speaking up.
There's an
Thanks for coming out,
inferiority.
Pat. I hope you enjoyed it.
There's an inferiority that some people feel
We usually have about 10 or 12.
that
Oh.
that
Tonight was a small
some-
crowd,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
we usually have about 10 or 12.
And,
But they're all
and
brilliant
it's not appreciated by
There's a few
a lot
that
of
are,
people.
there's a
Some
few,
people.
Somebody,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to be here.
And it can be
Great. Hope you can make
spouses.
Okay.
Most of us are eligible.
Oh, geez.
I just
All right,
think,
now we won't see the poor lady.
see, I think that,
We're learning a lot. Thanks,
I
Pat.
understand
All right.
exactly what
Nice
you
to
mean.
meet you, by the way.
But I
Yeah,
don't
you
think
too.
it's
Bye.
something
See ya.
that,
Bye-bye.
a person who doesn't want to speak doesn't. They've made a decision. And I don't feel like I should nitpick their decision if they don't want to talk. They have a reason. I don't know what their reason is. I'm the other guy. I'm the guy that always wants to talk. So,
No,
Well,
I'm not.
I don't know
I'm
what the
not-
reason is, but that's their choice.
But see,
They can talk if they want to.
The system also allows people, the system also affords people the opportunity to say a lot when they, if they want to. They just get in the queue. And when their turn next, they go. And so there's,
No, I
if you look
understand.
at it as talking a lot, if you use different language and say participating, then it's not a bad thing. It's that whole funny thing about the use of language. It's so can be so insidious at the same time.
well.
So gracious.
well, you know why you choose your words. You don't know why somebody else chose their words.
I don't want any spoilers, but it's one of the things I'm raising about why human beings are off the charts, is that ability to compliment someone and give them the most heart-stabbing insult at the same time. No other species on this planet even comes close to doing anything like that.
That's our way of manifesting our basic animal
That's
nature.
an amazing mental agility
It's
to
a
do that.
DHR phenomenon.
Or it's an incredible skill.
THR?
DHR, dominance hierarchy related.
Thank you.
Well, it's also passive aggressive, and it's also lots of little tags that we've learned to put on that.
I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but
Well,
what other creature can you put in a costume, right? And when you put that creature in a costume, it takes on the role of whatever it knows that costume is projecting. You put a wizard's hat on a dog, and it just runs around with a stupid wizard's hat. It doesn't understand that it's like a dog wizard now, right? But you give even a child a demon mask.
So it's role play.
Yeah, and watch the demon, watch the idea of the demon spirit take over that kid's entire body. The sounds that they make and the way that they move their body completely gets transformed by just a canvas or a plastic mask on their face.
Paint 'em
There's
green,
things that
watch
we
'em
do
Hulk
that
out.
just are not even touchable by any other animal nature, stuff. And I'm going to go through dozens of these, make a case. That combined with technology, how we're in a totally new realm. It's
But
not.
that doesn't mean that these things that you're describing are not simply a sophisticated manifestation of what other animal species do.
When you
We
get to
have
a
all
certain,
different ways of fighting, all
well,
different
it'll be a good
ways.
debate, won't it? Because we get into this realm of so many examples, example after example, where we're different, so different. In fact, there's no comparison. That way, how many of these do we have to come up with to where we finally say we are something truly different? And that's the case I'm going to try to be making. It's a hard case.
Well,
It's a hard case. It's really easy to find the commonalities, I believe.
I don't find any difficulty at all in the statement that humans are a unique species
Right.
in a number of ways that no other species that we know of have ever even been a little bit like that. Yeah,
I've never seen a rabbit with a pair of eyeglasses.
and it's not just this. It's not just that simple stuff. It's not just that simple stuff at all. There's serious, subtle, complex differences in the behavior that we come up with for ourselves, for our close associates, for our near associates. It's not quite the same. And then for our external associates who are even yet different. And we have ways of ranking that. We have so many complex things that we do all the time. And animals don't do that.
And the
They
reason,
have
the reason we think on those terms,
They do it in simpler ways.
Us them.
see, the reason we think about that terms, right? The reason we even think that we're like those other animals, and the animals think on simpler terms, is because we have the creative imagination to do that, right? The animal doesn't do that the other way around. They don't have it. They don't have those faculties. They don't have those faculties.
That's a separate issue.
See, but we have the ability to project our humanity onto anything. We have the humanity. I'll show you when I do my presentation. You guys are gonna be blown away. Like you can have sympathy for a mannequin. A person can have sympathy for a mannequin. A person will have sympathy or empathy for completely inanimate things.
Pygmalion. You can write.
Animism.
We can
Yeah.
write literature
Yeah.
about that.
Yes, you can demonstrate anything that even does any type of human, displays any type of human characteristic at all, can then trigger those same empathetic neurons. There's not another species on the planet that even comes close to this. Not even close.
Now, how would we know if they were?
We're discussing next week's
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah,
tonight.
that's right.
Yeah, but
Let's not do
it's
that.
such an exciting topic. I
Is
mean,
this next week's?
yeah.
Yeah, let's
Such
not-
an exciting topic.
Let's not
Wait a
discuss
minute.
next week's topic tonight.
Oh, I'm not even scratching the surface of the material I've been accumulating for this, because I think it's a really important topic. I think that if we can learn to really understand what we are as human beings, we can then do a lot of the things that Bill wants to do with the ethics and, get this kind of progress that we really need.
See, I think that I don't think we begin to understand our potential. I really do. I think we grotesquely underestimate our
Amen,
potential.
brother. That's exactly what I'm saying.
But I don't think that makes us not animals.
Okay?
Right.
Well, maybe I'll convince your mind otherwise.
We need to hire-
Maybe I won't.
Well, are we plants?
Maybe I'll.
How do you know we're not plants?
Because we are as well.
Actually, we're mostly bacteria.
Yes.
We're plants
Yes,
as
we're
well.
mostly bacteria, and we're not individuals either.
Oh, I'm a colony.
Yes, you are.
We're a
Yes, you
colony.
are a colony.
Okay.
And the more time we spend together, the more likely our colonies are to be the same.
Well, they'll get similar.
Similar.
Certainly will, yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Well,
I'm disappointed because I can't be here next week.
oh,
Well, it'll be your chance to do the live stream.
Yeah.
yeah, you can tune into the live stream.
Okay. Did you get my text?
I believe so. Hold on. Let me shut this.